On September 26, 2013, Ella Yellick O'Connor, better known as Lorde, released her first ever LP, Pure Heroine. In a time where music like this was dominating the landscape, it seemed impossible for music like this to break out. Lorde's minimalistic instrumentals and her really real and intimate specific lyricism proved to be the mirror image of songs like these. So how and why did she break out? I have some thoughts. Overexposure. Electropop really took over the airwaves towards the end of the 2000s. Some people say it was correlated to the economic recession and whatnot, but it's undeniable that leading up to 2013, these songs were the rage, and who could blame the public for that? Some of them were straight up bangers. Speaking of bangers, I know this is a stretch, but I think Miley's whole era was sort of the wind up to Lorde hitting it out of the park with her records. I think people were looking for something authentic and different and real, so when Lorde came out with Royals, it went #1 for many weeks. But how and why did the song exactly break out? Star won her 2 Grammys, and that wasn't a fluke. Her second single Team landed #6 at the top 100, and her album Pure Heroine actually delivered the goods, pun intended. Longevity. Here comes the part where I run down the album and quickly break down each track because I can't get over how well this album has actually aged. Tennis Court is an underrated deep cut. I'm aware it was a single in some territories, but it never got its due in the US. It's sharp and slick. There's even an amazing Flume remix. 400 Lux is probably one of the more quirkier songs on the record, but it's also one of the most raw. It's a song about doing nothing with someone you love, and she wrote it about a guy she was with at the time, which ended up becoming the topic of Greenlight, so that's a little bit tragic now. Royals, well, I've talked enough about this bop. Ribs is literally her magnum opus. It's not a song, it's an emotion. One of the few songs in her entire discography that can actually hold a candle to the song is Supercut, which she kind of said was a little sister to the song. And honestly, the lyric, "It's so scary getting old," is forever burned in my mind because it's so true. Buzzcut Season is one of her deeper cuts. "I live in a hologram with you" is one of her most brilliant lines ever. Team was a perfect follow-up to Royals, especially message-wise, and was a smart single choice in hindsight. I was obsessed with the track, but I kind of wish she had delivered a second single that was a little bit more different. Glory and Gore. Her Mind. Someone please make an all-female reboot of Gladiator so we can put it in the trailer. Still Sane is a solid track. I'll be real, it's not one of my favorites, but it stands out because she really leans into the dream pop sensibilities that she does best. White Teeth Teens is a bop. This was one of my favorite tracks on first listen, and I still keep it in some of my rotations. A World Alone is probably the best track to close the album, and my personal favorite track. Sorry, Ribs. It boils down to the thesis of the album, which is the feeling of being alone and the realization that yes, we won't be young forever. We won't be suburban teens forever, but that feeling of being alone and misunderstood, that follows us long into life, long past adolescence. Which is one of the most mature and deep things that I've actually heard in a record. Yeah, it's a little dark, and I wish I could go into the extended tracks, but for the sake of brevity, I want to talk about the legacy of the album. Pure Heroine is something that I'd like to believe was the death knell to poptimism in general. It was the album that forced Lorde's contemporaries in the pop sphere to shift away from glossy, loud, and colorful productions to adapt to a less bombastic landscape that favors realism over fantasy, without exactly abandoning the elements of saying your dreams out loud, which is kind of strange. It's a little bit paradoxical, but she does it best, and that's why she's sort of captured this landscape and shifted the industry a certain way. Lorde's success has actually led to a bunch of knockoffs. Okay, some of these knockoffs would evolve into huge artists in their own right, artists that have broken away from sort of wanting to be Lorde into being their own selves. Some of them would just flop. And it's a testament to Lorde's lasting impact. When people look back on the history of music, or pop music at least, people will be impressed that this 16-year-old girl was able to move the industry. And say what you will about melodrama and its commercial performance, it did amazingly critically. She is a true artist, perhaps the artist of this generation, and she really did that with Pure Heroine. It's only been 5 years since the era, but it feels like yesterday because it sounds memorable, it sounds modern, it sounds real, it's timeless. It's one of the few records that I would argue are timeless. Once again, guys, thank you so much for listening and watching these videos. I've always wanted to cover pop music. And, like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. And thanks.